devotion. We will begin, as we always do, with our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it, I perceive it, and now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. All right, our devotion today is called The Same Spirit. And here is our affirmation, if you want to join me. Today, I will get up, get out, and get something. I will celebrate resurrection power. The same Spirit that resurrected Jesus also resides within me. I may fall, but I will get back up. So I have a great interest in all things astrological. So yesterday, was the big eclipse, which in retrospect, it was kind of underwhelming for us here in Georgia. Let me tell you what happened to me. I went to pick up my granddaughter from school. Her school actually released early so that the kids could participate, go with their parents wherever to do look at the eclipse. So she runs to the car and she says, "Lala, do you still have your Stone Mountain sticker on your car?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Kaya," who's her little friend, and her dad are going to the top of the mountain to see the eclipse. I was like, okay. So we get in the car, we go to Stone Mountain, and I'm thinking, I said, well, you can sit, because I'm not real fond of the sky lift, of the height thing. So I said, well, we can still see it down here from the bottom, because there was a bunch of people down around, with lawn chairs. And she says, I said, Lala doesn't really like to ride in the sky bucket. And she, with her little 7-year-old self, looked me straight in the eye and she said, "Lala, you've got to face your fear." So I thought, what choice do I have now with the 7-year-old little girl looking at me saying, "You have to." I was like, all right. So in the sky bucket we went. I did. And we went up to the top of the mountain and we found her friend and we had the glasses. And so, you can't really tell anything unless you're looking through the glasses. Well, I thought at something, because I looked and you could see that the sun was kind of a little sliver and where the moon was coming. But then after a while, you just get bored. So I took the glasses off and I'm talking, to the other father and the kids. And I'm thinking, well, it'll get dark in a minute. And then, everybody will go, and people were playing that song. Somebody was playing Total Eclipse of the Heart. So it didn't come. And finally the guy looks at me and he says, he did this to his watch. He says, "It's 3:13. It was supposed to peak at 3:04. I think we missed it." Ow, just hit my tooth on the microphone. And so we put the glasses back on, and sure enough, it had already kind of moved and was going across the... So anyway, we were there, so whatever energy that brought. But my whole point in saying that was the eclipse yesterday was in Aries, and Aries is the sign of moving forward, sometimes aggressively. So, that's what this devotion is talking about, that when you fall down, you have the power within you. That resurrection power is that moving forward aggressively energy. All right, so we have another Easter-themed devotion. It's just that time of year. So here we go. It says, Easter is celebrated all over the world. The resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth is the most important holy day in the Christian faith. Easter church... Easter church cliches vary from the anti-secular, Easter is not about a bunny, to the more liturgical, Christ the Lord is risen today. But what is the hidden mystery of Easter? Easter is about the embodiment of resurrection in our own lives. Proverbs reminds us that a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again. I am not suggesting that Jesus fell from grace. What I am suggesting is that there is no power in the world that can keep us from rising again after we experience difficulty. Romans, specifically 8:11, declares, "He who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you." So, the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is within us and working for us. This is how we apply resurrection power to our journey. We personalize it. We can get back up from divorce, bankruptcy, bad choices, career failures, and personal embarrassments. Jesus is no longer in the grave, and we do not have to remain buried in the vicissitudes of life. Get back up again. All right, so that sounds a little like what Apostle Charles Francis was talking about on Sunday, which we'll get into a little more in the teaching today. He talked about heat and pressure. And what they produce in us. And by the way, that is my title today, Heat and Pressure. Difficulties occur in life. They are inevitable, just like the situations or the vicissitudes that were just mentioned in the devotion. But you get to decide how you will respond to them, how you will handle them. Will you allow them to break you, or will you allow them to mold you into a diamond? We're going to get to that in a moment as well. Right now, though, let's read our ending prayer. Resurrection power, awaken within me the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead. I may fall, but I know there is a power in me enabling me to get back up again. Amen. Okay, so deep breath. Before we say our connection affirmation, I have a short announcement for you to share with you. This Thursday night, 2 days from now, join us please at Morehouse College, 7 p.m. in the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel for their nonviolent cosmic Woldhouse Assembly and induction ceremony, where Bishop Carlton D. Pearson's portrait will be officially displayed. As a part of the ceremony, Pastor Clarice, my mom, will be playing a piano duet with Dr. Marva Carter, who is Dr. Lawrence Carter's wife. And to make it easy, we have chartered a bus that will leave here from Spirit and Truth Sanctuary at 6 p.m. for $20 per person. Spaces are available, so just show up to the church by 6 p.m. on Thursday if you want to ride the shuttle bus or call the church for more information. So that is an important announcement. Now let's say our connection affirmation together. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of Spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. So, heat and pressure. In too great a degree, they become uncomfortable. But what they produce on the other side of that discomfort is one of the most valuable, the most sought after objects in the world, the diamond. So we're going to revisit a song and a story today that I've shared with you before. It is a song by the band Pink Floyd, and it's called Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that song, but it's a great one. So let's begin with a few quotes, though. Today's mantra: I forgive myself for buying into the illusion that I am lacking in any way. I am enough as I am today, worthy of love, worthy of success, worthy of happiness, just because. End of story. Okay, next, your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see your worth. The next one, failures can be called strengtheners as they make you determined to reach your goal with the lessons they teach. All right, and next, there are no mistakes, only lessons. Growth is a process of trial and error. Okay, I want to stop right here and point something out. we're going to talk quite a bit today about words and their precise meaning. And this word trial has several definitions. We use it, of course, when we're talking about the formal process of going before a judge and a jury to present evidence in a court case. That's one meaning of the word trial. But most often when we hear the word trial, we think of it in terms of, especially in the church world, trials and tribulations of what we're going through. Something very difficult and uncomfortable that you are experiencing. So, however, it also means exactly what it says in the quote I just read. Trial and error, as in you try something, you give it a trial run, and if it doesn't work, if there's an error, then you simply try something else. And that's the context and meaning of it that I want you to think of when I read the next quote. It says, "The gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man perfected without trials." Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean pain and suffering, as in trials and tribulation. It means trying something that may be outside of your comfort zone. Okay, so there may be a bit of friction when you get outside of your comfort zone, just a little discomfort. But if it doesn't work, if you fall down, you get right back up on the horse and try again, or you try something else. You go down a different road, find another approach. As our devotion just talked about, you get back up again. All right, next quote. I love this one. I think Thomas Edison said this when he was trying to invent the light bulb. He said, "I have never failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Okay, so lastly, true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. Okay, I love that. This concept is what I want to focus on for a bit to begin today. It came from a book called Mere Christianity by a man named C.S. Lewis. So several years back, my brother brought us a message about being at peace with being good, or with our innate goodness. And he also mentioned as a part of that message that it is our birthright and our nature to shine, okay? Even though we've been through hundreds, if not thousands of years worth of conditioning by religion, not just Christianity, but many religions, telling us that we're unworthy, that we're undeserving, that we're sinful, that we're hopelessly flawed and in need of salvation. Somehow the goodness of humanity has managed to keep shining even through all of that. So in his sermon, he defined humility. So let's go back now to our final quote. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. So his definition of humility was agreeing with what God says about you. We talked about that a little bit last week in the devotion, that when you disagree with God, when God says you're good and you say, "Oh no, I'm not. I'm just a humble little sinful wretch." That's actually very, very prideful, because you're disagreeing with God. So another favorite quote of mine along these same lines, I heard a preacher say one time, "You are who God says you are, even if you're not acting like it at the moment." And I have to remember that sometimes about other people as well as myself. Many times we think of being humble as being unassuming, and then we shift quickly from that concept of being unassuming to the concept of being unworthy. And those two things are not the same thing at all, but we tend to conflate them. So because I love words so much, I'm going to take the time to break this down. Unassuming means, according to the dictionary, modest, lacking in arrogance, pleasant or polite. And then it goes a little further, saying, when you assume, you draw conclusions that you shouldn't. If you're unassuming, then you don't make that mistake. All right, so unworthy, on the other hand, means not deserving of effort, attention, or respect, having little value or merit. So we see here immediately how different those two words and concepts are, but for some reason, they're often understood to mean the same thing. Let's go back now to my brother's definition. I'm going to quote him directly because I like the way he said it, and I can't say it any better. He said, humility is agreeing with what God says about you. Think about how much pride it takes to disagree with the one who created you. God said, you're made in my image and likeness. Then God stepped back from you and said, you are good. So good that I'm going to give you the authority to name things, to subdue, and care for the earth. And I would add, as he did later on, but I'll stop quoting word for word now, God also gave us the power and authority to create as he creates, which will be an important point a little later on in the teaching. So it's not being humble to think less of yourself, as the C.S. Lewis quote says. Thinking less of yourself, according both to C.S. Lewis and my brother, is not true humility. In fact, that is the ultimate demonstration of pride, to disagree with God about who he says you are and who he created you to be, because you're basically telling him he didn't do a good job. So, true humility, the quote continues, is thinking of yourself less, as in being less self-conscious, spending less time thinking about yourself. I hope you understand what I mean when I say that. Since we're defining words and looking at the difference between concepts that seem similar but are not, let's break this down a little bit more. Being self-aware and being self-conscious are two different things, just like being unassuming and being unworthy are two different things. Being self-conscious is feeling uncomfortably nervous or embarrassed when in the presence of or when being observed by other people. So this equates to the part of the C.S. Lewis quote that talks about thinking less of yourself. You're always worried about how you look or how you sound to other people, because there's always this underlying feeling of not being good enough. So you spend a great deal of your time thinking about yourself and how you're presenting yourself to others, because you don't have the confidence that you should have about how you are presenting yourself. So self-awareness, though, that's being self-conscious. Being self-aware is having a clear perception of your personality, including your strengths, weaknesses, thoughts, beliefs, motivation, and emotions. Self-awareness allows you to understand other people, how they perceive you, your attitude, and your responses to them in the moment. Remember, we always say many, many, many times, whatever people are directing towards you is not about you, it is about them. And once you truly understand that, then you can become less self-conscious about yourself. Okay. And so that equates to the part of the quote that says thinking of yourself less, which just means spending less time thinking about how you're presenting yourself, because you're already aware of and hopefully have made peace with who you are, your strengths and your weaknesses, and you're able to spend more of your time when you are with others actually interacting with them in the moment and putting more of the focus on them, because you're not having to worry so much about you. So true humility then is actually having a certain level of self-confidence because you agree with what God says about you, which is that you are made in his image and likeness with the same ability to create as he does. But as we've talked about before, none of us are born knowing how to create on the same level as God, because you are literally, physically, mentally, and spiritually a baby when you come here. And what do babies do? Babies grow. You grow up here on earth. That's the way it works. And that's what we all know and agree to before our spirit incarnates into a human body. The purpose of incarnating and living life as a human is to experience life, which involves some experimentation. And so staying with our theme today of defining words, let's look for a second at the words experiment and experience. Both have the same Latin root. They both come from the word experior, which means to gain knowledge through repeated trials. Now, what does that say to you? It says to me, we don't come here knowing everything already. We're going to have to experiment with life, specifically our ability to create. To experiment means to take a course of action tentatively adopted without being sure of the eventual outcome. And we're going to have to go through this process of creating repeatedly until we get it right. So just like anything else you start out doing that you have the ability to do, but not the mastery of just yet, you have to practice. Just like a little baby, when he takes his first steps, is a little wobbly. Same thing. When we're creating, when we're first experimenting with our ability to create, we're a little wobbly, but that's okay. Creating is an innate ability we have, but it is our job to cultivate and perfect that ability as we grow. That's something else that Apostle Francis said on Sunday. Remember, he said that you just have to keep working at it. He said, what was it he said? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. But you have to practice a little bit before you can get perfect. An important thing to remember is that God is aware of this. If we use the common model of God as our parent, either our mother or our father, then look at it from that perspective. When your toddler is first learning a skill to walk, to feed herself, to tie his shoes, anything, you obviously, as a loving parent, don't expect that child to get it 100% right or to do it perfectly the very first time, do you? And the fact that it requires repeated attempts for that child to learn a new skill doesn't make that child unworthy in your eyes, does it? Of course it doesn't. However, sometimes the child feels unworthy and upset with themselves when they can't figure it out immediately. So, your child will get upset with himself, but you don't think he's unworthy. That's your job to tell him, it's okay, try it again, buddy, whatever. So the unworthiness is in the child's eyes, not the parents'. So in this parent-child scenario, it is clear that we are the child and God is the parent, and we've established that any feeling of unworthiness is all on our end, not on God's, correct? All right, so we're all on the same page so far. We'll revisit all of this in a few minutes, but right now I want to move on and mention something else from that sermon of my brother's that speaks to this process we've been talking about of creating by trial and error. We talk a lot about creating our own reality, and we do. But a part of that conversation should be this conversation that we're having right now, that learning to create is a process that requires practice. And when we create for ourselves a reality that is less than desirable, it doesn't mean we deserved it. It just means we haven't yet mastered the skill of creating perfectly and that we need a little more practice. So point 3 of that sermon was never confess or believe that you deserve bad things. Even if you invited it, entertained it, created it, and manifested it, you still don't deserve bad things. Why? 2 reasons. Now, this is me. I'm leaving my brother. 1, because you were originally created as a perfect being in the image and likeness of God, a little God, just like Apostle Francis was telling us on Sunday, who is completely worthy. Okay, so remember a teaching we had a while back about changing the conversation where we said the world is perfect. There are just a lot of people in it having bad conversations. So everything bad that has ever happened to anyone is a result of one of those bad conversations, whether it was with someone else or just with yourself. It was man-made and based on misinformation about yourself. Because what do we know about things that come from God? Every good and perfect gift comes from God, from above. No bad things come from God because God doesn't see or recognize anything he created as being unworthy, not the world and not us. So unworthiness is a perception on our end, not his. All right, second reason we don't deserve bad things is because, as my brother said in his sermon, it, referring to the bad thing, is only here to teach us what not to invite, entertain, create, and manifest again. It is not here to teach us that we are unworthy. Yes, it's here Yes, we own it, but as children of God made in his image and likeness, we deserve better than this because we are worthy. Number one. And number two, we are here, like I was just talking about, to experiment and practice creating our own lives. And the way we learn on earth is through comparison. The earth is a place of duality where we see and know everything in relation to its opposite. So creating something we don't want is one of the ways we learn what it is to create what we do want. Which brings us to another point. When you realize you've created something you don't want, you come to yourself. We could just as easily say, you remember yourself. You remember who you are and what you were created to be. And you compare it to where you are now and realize this is not where I am supposed to be. As he said, this is why it's so important for us to feel what we create. Sometimes we have to eat a little bit of that pig's food, like the prodigal son, to realize this is not what I want to be eating. Sometimes you got to taste it first and go, ooh, yeah, no, I don't like that. Sometimes you have to be in the wrong relationship to appreciate the right one. Sometimes you have to experience being in a bad financial situation to know you never want to be in that situation again. And sometimes you have to say to yourself, even though I made all the decisions that led me to be in this situation, this is not who I am. Now, I believe that Adam could have come to himself like this in the garden, but he didn't. Unlike the prodigal son, Adam could not let go of his unworthiness long enough to come to himself. Let's go back to our definition of unworthiness, not deserving of effort, attention, or respect. It is our feeling of being unworthy that makes us believe we do not deserve good things, or that we do deserve the bad things that sometimes happen to us. And that's what we inherited from Adam. Not actual unworthiness, not original sin, as we've been taught, but the inability to come to ourselves and realize our worthiness even in our naked state. Adam said, I'm naked and I'm ashamed. And God said to Adam, or this is what I'm taking a little bit of poetic license here. This is what I imagine God said to Adam. Who told you that? Of course you're naked. That's how I made you. Your nakedness is beautiful and natural. It's only your misperception that nakedness is something to be ashamed of, that nakedness makes you unworthy to be in my presence, that somehow it makes you a less than perfect creation, undeserving of all the perfect gifts that I want to freely give you, that's bothering you. It's your misperception that's bothering you, not how I made, not your actual nakedness. So similarly, God says to us, I put you here to experience life and to experiment with your power to create. And I understand that you're not going to get everything 100% right on the first try or 100% of the time. I'm good with you in your naked state of trial and error. I'm good with what you consider all of your failed attempts at creating your life. You call them mistakes. I call them practice. Okay? You're the one who's not good with them, and you're the one who allows them to make you feel unworthy. All right, so can anyone else imagine God saying that to us? I hope so. I truly believe that that is God's heart toward us. So the last point from that message was say to yourself or come to yourself. Okay, so number 4 was come to yourself. Remember, then the next point he made was say to yourself. Say what? That you are worthy. So first we have to come to ourselves. We have to come to the realization that we are worthy of more than the situation we're currently in. We come to this realization through the way we feel. So we have the feeling first, and then through that we come to ourselves, remember who we are, and then it's time to take action. Then we speak, which is itself an act of creation. In our process of experimenting with creation, one of the things we must learn is that sometimes the order we do things in matters. So when you're cooking or baking and you're following a recipe, it begins by giving you a list of all the ingredients you'll need and how much of each. But it doesn't end there, okay? Then it goes through the steps. What you put in first, then you stir this in, and then you cut this much up of this thing and into this size pieces, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is, you can't just take the list of ingredients and dump them all into a pot or a dish and think you're done. So if you get the steps out of order, especially in baking, or so I'm told, I do not bake, you can really mess things up, because certain things need to go in before other things due to the way they're going to react with each other. I was reading something the other day that I thought explained this concept beautifully by describing, again, in astrological terms, how and why the order of how we create things is important. This part of it said, the word inspire comes from in spirit, meaning to have spirit or life-giving force come through you. Inspiration is necessary for us to express all that is ineffable or beyond words or description. Inspiration is the first step in creation, and how we create can be illustrated by something called the Virgo-Pisces polarity. So Pisces, every sign has an opposite, and Pisces and Virgo are opposite signs. Pisces is a water sign. It flows like music. It's beauty for beauty's sake, with little regard for whether or not it's practical. Virgo is an earth sign. It is stable. It is concerned with efficiency, integrity, and purity of purpose. Are you a Virgo? Okay, all my Virgos. Okay, I'm a fellow earth sign. I'm a Capricorn, but yeah, I have a Virgo sun. So I love this statement. Pisces is poetry, where Virgo is prose. This polarity highlights the tension between approaching life in a very physical, matter-based, action-oriented, mechanical way, and approaching life by aligning with the energetic flow. It's doing versus being, thinking versus feeling, which, by the way, I'm just going to add in here. Neither one is wrong. We need both. It's just when you get to one extreme or the other that you get in trouble. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac and therefore contains all the other signs within it. Pisces is all about the now. It doesn't pay particular attention to the construct of time, and it doesn't get in a hurry. Anybody know a Pisces? They are rarely on time to anything because they just don't look at the clock. It's not important to them. Virgo, its opposite, can get frustrated when other people are not on time or when things are not happening quickly enough. When manifestation is delayed, Virgo starts looking for the reasons why and who to blame. And they mostly blame themselves. Virgos are very hard on themselves. The dark side of Virgo is perfectionism, to the point that it turns into, I'm not good enough, and nothing I ever do is good enough. Or in the context of our teaching today, I am unworthy. So it's interesting that we've been talking about Earth being the place where we come to learn how to create. Okay, well, that's what we're doing here. And Virgo, the earth sign, is one that tends, in its lower expression, to represent unworthiness. Virgo, as the information we just read tells us, is all about approaching life from an action-first standpoint, where its opposite, Pisces, is all about making sure everything feels right first, not getting in a hurry. And of course, in order to create, you've got to be concerned with both feeling and action. But just like in my brother's sermon, the order matters. You have to come to yourself first. You have to feel the feeling, but then you don't stay there. Then you have to say to yourself, then you have to take action. So because we've been raised in a westernized culture, we've been conditioned to believe that action and thinking are far superior to being and feeling. And so we tend to want to act first and put more emphasis on the action part. In fact, we've been taught that showing our feelings or following our feelings too much is a sign of weakness, and that we must work very hard to manifest and create. Our culture glorifies struggle and highly values the warrior archetype. And so we often make things much harder than they have to be. But from everything I've read and studied about the creation process, the inspiration or the inspiriting, which is feeling as if whatever you want to create or manifest is already accomplished, needs to come first. And then you take whatever action is required. If you act too quickly, it's like climbing up a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall, as we've talked about before. You get to the top, but then you're like, oh, okay, this is not what I wanted. I didn't take the time to look what was at the top of this before I started up this ladder. So it's like stopping in the middle of the process. I've also said before that everything you need already exists, and it's just orbiting around you in the field, just out of your reach. And the way you attract it to you or pull it out of that void of creation to yourself is by matching its vibrational frequency. I think I talked about this in the teaching about the difference between begging, commanding, and allowing. You remember when I talked about that, the 3 levels of prayer? And we learned that begging won't get you what you need because it doesn't match the vibrational frequency of the universe, which is perfect and whole. The universe doesn't even understand the concept of begging. In computer terms, the universe cannot open the file of begging because it doesn't understand it. The universe, as God created it, doesn't speak that language. It also does not speak the language of unworthiness, which begging is a result of. If you feel like you're worthy, you're not begging anybody for anything. You say, I'm not. I was very much like this in my younger days when I was dating. I was like, there's another one in line. Bye. It's like, I'm not begging anybody to stay with me. All right. So it's important for us to feel as if what we want is already happening first. But we've been taught the complete opposite. We've been taught to put our feeling nature on the back burner and to just push through and work, think first. Then if there's time, we can feel if we absolutely have to. We've also been taught that our inner world, where things like peace, happiness, our sense of worthiness reside, will get into the proper alignment once we acquire, once we obtain through our hard work, whatever it is we're wanting or needing. But that's completely backwards too. And it is the result of this idea that everything is mechanical, and the only way we get things is by acting and doing, working and struggling. We've been taught that our worthiness depends on how well we can act, do, and work and struggle, when it's really the other way around. We must feel worthy first. Then we can speak and act from that place of knowing who we are and what we deserve. We've been taught that we are separate from the natural world and from divinity, that God's power is outside of us somewhere. We've been taught that if we can convince this power that's outside of us to give us what we want, then we'll be happy. This totally ignores the spirit within us and the idea that everything that happens in the physical world happens in the invisible realm of energy first, which we've talked about before is that place called the void. If you want something new, you must create and manifest from that void. Otherwise, you're only able to work with what's already there, and it's just more of the same. You're just regurgitating. It will never be anything more or new than what you have now. So just like the prodigal son, you can serve it up any way you want to. You can call it whatever you want, but pig slop is pig slop. And until you are able to feel that you are worthy of more and then find the courage to get up, step into the void, explore the chaos. So remember that word void in the original Greek, that's what it means, chaos. And chaos is scary sometimes. Okay, we don't want to go into the void because it's unknown. We don't know what's going to happen in there. Remember, one of the definitions I gave you before is you take an approach without knowing what the eventual outcome will be. But what's that called? Faith. That's why we have it. But so that's where all the new stuff is. It's in the void. And all the new material from which we want to create is there. Yesterday, I sent my husband a text kind of jokingly saying, don't look into the sun during the eclipse. And he wrote back, but that's where all the fun is. Okay. I don't know if y'all remember that old song from the 70s, Blinded by the Light, but that's what it says. It says, Mama told me never to look into the eyes of the sun, but I said, Mama, that's where the fun is. So it's all fun until you're blind. Until you can let go of your unworthiness, though, you will continue to eat the pig slop until you know that's not what you're supposed to be eating. So recently I watched a documentary about the band Pink Floyd that I talked about at the beginning today. And I found out some things I'd never known about them before, such as for the first few years that they were a band, they had a different lead singer than during the years when they became really famous. David Gilmour, who is one of my rock star crushes from way back, he was not an original member of the band, and I didn't know that until I watched this documentary. And it's really a sad story. The first guy that was their lead singer was really talented and very creative. They considered him the brains and the driving force of the band. He wrote most of the songs, but he became a little too fond of LSD, and he lost control of himself. He would show up to play concerts and completely blank out and forget words, or he would just get out on stage and just strum one chord over and over. He would disappear for days at a time and miss rehearsals. So his bandmates finally said, we can't do this. We're going to have to replace you. So they did, but they weren't angry with him. They had a lot of compassion for him. And in fact, they wrote a tribute song in his honor. And it is one of my very favorite songs of theirs, and it's called Shine On, You Crazy Diamond. And I'm going to end today with some of the lyrics. And as always, I'll add my commentary in. What's important to understand is this was the late 1960s, early 1970s. They were a highly successful rock band, so they all did LSD. I mean, they all did it. But somehow, the other three members of the band were able to catch themselves. They were able to come to themselves before it went too far. And they talked about this in the documentary. The others were able to stop before they destroyed themselves. Something inside them told them they deserved better, that they deserved more from life. But he was not able to do that. So they wrote this song about him. And it's the video, it's everything is symbolic to me. The way this song is 13 minutes long. It is a long song. And there's 9 minutes of music before one word is spoken. And so as I was watching the documentary, they played the video of the song. And when it starts, it's just like these misty shapes, and you don't really know what's going on, and it's just this music. And then as you keep watching, things start coming into focus. And I thought, well, even their video is symbolic, because that's what I'm talking about today is sometimes you got to trust that process of creation. Remember we talked about last week when Jesus healed the blind man, the first time he touched his eyes, he said, I see men, but I see them as trees. It's not complete. So sometimes that creation process takes a little bit of time, but if you stop in the middle, you just got a blob. So you got to wait until the whole thing is revealed, which this song and that video that went with it are a perfect example of. So here are some of the lyrics. It says, remember when you were young, you shone like the sun. So I'm gonna relate that to us today is when you remember yourself as you were when God created you, perfect in his likeness and image. Then it says, shine on, you crazy diamond. Now there's a look in your eyes that's like black holes in the sky. All right, so this is what happens when you buy into the belief that you are unworthy. Your vision gets blurred. You don't see things clearly. It's just blobs. It's men like trees. Shine on, you crazy diamond. It keeps coming back to that refrain. Doesn't matter. Keep shining. You were caught in the crossfire of childhood and stardom. So this is talking about things that happened to this man as a child, trauma he experienced, and then he got put into the spotlight at a very young age, and he couldn't handle it, and that's why he turned to the drugs. Now, what did our devotion talk about today? Getting back up again. And what did Apostle Francis do on Sunday? He had a perfect demonstration of this with my brother and by proxy with all the rest of us. He said, yeah, this happened. All this stuff, all this trauma, all these experiences, you went through it. But what are we doing? We're washing it away. And we can do that. That can happen. You don't have to keep staying in all of that. You can wash it away. So the last lines I'll read are the most haunting. They call him a list of names at the end of the song, not all of them good. But even so, and even though he made every choice that got him where he was, they wanted him to keep shining and believe that he could, because innately they knew, even if he had forgotten, that he was still worthy of good things. So they say, you reached for the secret too soon. You cried for the moon, threatened by shadows at night and exposed by the light. Come on, you legend, you seer of visions. Come on, you painter, you piper, you prisoner, and shine. So that last name they called him was Prisoner, because that's what he had become, because he did not come to himself in the pig pen. He never realized, I'm worth more than this. He stayed there. They didn't want him to, though. That's what we become when we keep buying into the fact that we're unworthy. We become prisoners of our own perception of ourselves. When we stop in the middle of the process because we don't understand that the reason we came here was to experiment and create and practice, and that God's okay with that. He doesn't expect 100% perfection from our first attempts. He doesn't see us as unworthy just because we created something that wasn't quite right and we realized we needed to try again and make it better. So if it's not tasting good to you, He's not expecting you to eat the whole thing. You put that on yourself. You say you have to do that. He didn't say you had to do that. Once you taste the pig's food and realize it's bad, stop eating it. Stop feeling like that's all you deserve. Let go of your unworthiness and create something else. That's the process. You will never stop being a child of God, no matter what you do. And all He wants you to do is keep shining like the diamond you are, the diamond He created you to be. Even through the heat and even through the pressure, keep shining. Amen? Amen. Let's stand up together and sing our ending song, Blessed Always. Remember, tonight at 9:30, we will resume. My brother will resume the podcast. Tomorrow night, 6:30. Thursday night, remember, if you're going to go to the Martin Luther King Jr. Chapel, Friday morning devotion, and then we'll see you again, of course, on Sunday. Let's go, Miss Diane.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen.
Be at peace. I love you. We'll see you next week.